Every game at its core contains ritualistic elements that, in the case of ancient games, usually hold deep connections with the realm born with and somewhat living within humanity as such, and that is the ancient realm of the sacred. This is the gist of the knowledge produced by anthropology in its so-called structuralist turn, emerging initially in post-war France, most notably in the works of Claude Levi-Strauss and those influenced by him, working under banners such as structural linguistics, mythologies, and semiotics. Strauss became a prominent figure in the colorful and multifaceted scene of post-war French theory by paving a new way of analyzing kinship systems. Elementary structures of kinship garnered appraisals of many, like Simone de Beauvoir, and also earned Strauss his doctorate, which allowed him to use the title doctor before his name, and also brought him so many kinds of privileges that the post-war French government was willing to provide for its intellectuals. Going against understanding kinship as a function of ancestry or history, Strauss opted to analyze systems of kinship, not diachronically and with regards to matters of inheritance and evolution, but through analyzing logical groupings and active relationships within the functioning of a system in a freeze of time that brings about the abstraction of ahistorical structures. In so doing, Strauss demonstrated a universal function among distant cultures across time and space, the function of alliance, particularly through the exchange of women, which he argued underpinned social organization. Strauss, unbound of historical tendencies, went about writing the wild thought or the savage mind to demonstrate the equity of savage thought structures with civilized ones and general characteristics of human mind. Later on, it was time for a structural mythology that came about in 4 distinct and exciting titles. You might be asking, what is this? An introduction to French structuralism or, well, both? It is an introduction to French structuralism, yet the aim is to situate a theoretical project of mine. My name is Taman. I am a trans woman in the middle of my transition, living somewhere over the rainbow, where hell is just around the corner. I am a scholar without a school, a scholar without belonging to a particular school. I don't belong to a particular school, partly because I was somewhat expelled from the last one I attended almost a decade ago. I say somewhat expelled, yet what I mean is in an intense Kafkaesque manner. And I leave it on that note because it is a long story and mostly irrelevant to the content presented on this channel. The critical part is the result that dragged me to English YouTube, and that is desperate unemployment as a consequence of a halted academic career, heavily influenced by my societal conditions of living as a visible trans woman. Anyway, around a year ago, I decided to migrate. migraine. I decided to migrate, linguistically speaking, to the English intellectual scene on YouTube to continue my scholarly work and hopefully to make a living out of this, which would be impossible without your support. So please like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also support me on Patreon if you can. Do it, and it would be really well appreciated by intense labor put into producing quality video essays on ideas you will find nowhere but on historiography, because it is very critical historiography. What is presented on this channel revolves around ideas that have fascinated me during years of studies within and in between different disciplines of humanities. And the first series, titled A Secret History of Chess, is an idea I have already worked on in writing and, of course, in another language other than English, that is Farsi. The idea as a whole was an excess within an already excessive project in and of itself, a critical historiography around the Iranian constitutional revolution, linking the political events to the regicide that took place 2 decades or so before the political revolution, and also opening the case labeled as closed in national histories toward a form of universal history through links with international events that have remained unthought within the confines of established histories, most notably so the Great War, aka the First World War or World War One. Still, notwithstanding the plenty of materials that I've brought to the table, my works in general in Farsi have not really received any recognition, and the best I've got are labels like French theory and intellectualism, intended as derogatory to further disregard my work. Yet I really enjoyed and do enjoy the entitlement, so much so that someone throwing the label at me felt the need to add a complimentary note to the insult. Something like this. It's not that I see you as an avatar of the theory, but that you are just an imitator of some postmodern French gibberish. Now let's return to Strauss and structuralism. Structuralism. However, we should go further in time to get to the roots of French structuralism, which is more Swiss than French. Long before structural anthropology came about to analyze cultural phenomena in a systematic atemporality, Ferdinand de Saussure, a Swiss linguist, went about ramifying human language as a mysteriously unified phenomena entangled with matters of culture and nature alike into two very distinct realms: parole, or language in use, as opposed to language as a system of signs. Saussure's treatment of language as a system of signs or a system of differences firstly devoids the primary element of the system of any positive quality or value which is attributed or projected onto them either by the common sense of human praxis or theoretically so by the ideologies of bourgeois linguistics, as Walter Benjamin would have liked to call it. The bond between the signifier and the signified is arbitrary. The first principle of structural linguistics introduces a bar that breaks the unity of a sign as a positive entity in and of itself and reconceptualizes this primary object of semiology as an arbitrary link between two different terms. On the one hand, a signifier, that is, any minimal form of articulation, phonetic or vocal in nature, and also a meaningful juxtaposition of those minimal elements that builds up a word in any given system or language. And on the other hand, a signified, that is, a mental content produced in signification. What Saussure's formulations brought about was the autonomy of signifier or the minimalism of structure as put by Samuel Tomsic in his reading of Jacques Lacan's take on structural linguistics. What interests us the most in this theoretical conjuncture is that Saussure looked into chess for an analogy in theorizing language's distinct temporal and atemporal aspects and made a blunder. A game of chess is like an artificial realization of what language offers in a natural form. It should be noted that Saussure was not alone in his interest in chess as a linguist. Ludwig Wittgenstein, another prominent intellectual figure of the time, if not in linguistics, but in logic, also liked using the analogy of rule-governed games like chess to theorize how language works. Yet, notwithstanding the intellectual attention, something about the game remained wholly unthought in these analogical approaches, which, unbeknownst to their authors, were in aversion to the game's construct and its historicity. Roy Harris, one of Saussure's English interpreters, alludes to this systematic aversion in his work on the convergence of Saussure's structural linguistics and Wittgenstein's conception of language games. As Harris points out, the assimilation of language with games is out of the question in any society that didn't have the institution of games, in the sense that European society recognizes tennis, chess, bridge, etc. as games. For Saussure and Wittgenstein, the unthinkable element in a game like chess is the pertaining of a ritual and a particular symbolism to that game, which to semiotics of the time seemed like to be a rule governing a game. To play with Wittgenstein's notion of rule-governed games. A constant ritual in play. This is the sole principle of chess, which is why the game knows neither a winner between the twin kings nor an end to the tension between the two and their respective camps. And this principle is totally discarded and neglected in Saussure's otherwise careful account of chess. Saussure rightly pointed out that chess pieces like a knight compared to a queen do not carry intrinsic values, yet curiously neglected that the two kings hold absolute positions within the game's value system, which makes them invaluable. Respecting this absolute position of the twin kings might seem like an arbitrary rule to us modern people, but it is the absolute principle of the game pertaining to the king's insignia, a quintessential part of the semiotics, or say the symbolism of the game. Now let us compare chess, its 8x8 board, and the multiple ranks of pieces involved in its play with the game of Go, another game of Eastern origins, which has a larger board, officially 19 by 19, and a ton of uniform pieces called stones. The two games are not so distinct in symbolism, since the board in both games represents and resembles a territory, yet with different functions. The board as territory is part and parcel of the objectives of Go, which is surrounding the most out of the space presented on the board and also capturing the opponent's stones as a function of that surrounding. Yet for chess, the board is but a set of squares functioning as a space for another objectives, which is